August 17th, 2006. Brandy Hall is working her shift at a volunteer fire station in Malabar, Florida. While working, she calls home around 9:30 p.m. to tell her family goodnight and say prayers with her children. Unknown to her husband Jeff at the time, this would be the last time he would hear from Brandy. Then she leaves the fire department at 10:51 p.m. At 11:06 p.m., she takes a phone call that ends at 11:17 p.m. Just a little after 11:30, her husband Jeff attempts to call Brandy and is unable to reach her. Believing that Brandy is busy and probably on a call, he goes to bed expecting to hear from her in the morning. When Brandy Hall disappears that night, a whole lot of theories begin to surface and float around amongst her group of family and friends and people that knew Brandy. Initial thoughts that Brandy left on her own. However, those close to Brandy don't believe that theory, as she would never give up and leave her children behind. As time would go on, however, more information would surface, along with secrets that Brandy had in her life. It would become more apparent that it was believed that Brandy would cross paths with foul play. But with who and why? Welcome to the campfire. Grab your s'mores and grab a seat. Thanks for joining me tonight around the fire where we discuss the dark world of true crime. This is the Campfire Crime Chronicles, a true crime podcast. And this is still the unsolved case of Brandy Hall. Before we get into the case tonight, I want to thank the show's sponsor, BetterHelp, for helping keep the flame lit of the campfire for this episode. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service that's 100% online. So you don't have that awkwardness of sitting in a waiting room with a whole bunch of other strangers waiting to see your therapist. With BetterHelp, you have access to a network of over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with whatever you're dealing with. All you have to do to get started is answer some questions about what your needs and preferences are in therapy. So that way, BetterHelp can match you with a therapist that is right for you. And if you want to change your therapist because maybe you're not comfortable with them, you can change your therapist at any time for no additional charge. You also don't have to wait any specific time or any number of sessions to change your therapist. So when you match up with that right therapist, you can talk to your therapist however is most comfortable for you, whether it's text, chat, phone, or video. You can also message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you and your schedule. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom-picked for you with more scheduling flexibility and more affordable prices. So if you go to the website and use the show's code, betterhelp.com/CCC, not only does that let them know that you heard it at the campfire, but you'll also receive 10% off your first month. So that's betterhelp.com/CCC. BetterHelp, HELP.com/CCC. And I'll also have a link provided in the show notes. As I was researching this case, the more I researched, the more I uncovered, like that thread in your shirt that you pull, and you think it's just a short string. And by the time you're done, you've unstitched what seems to be half or the entire shirt. That's kind of what I was feeling like whenever I was researching this case. So this may or may not be a two-parter. Brandy was born September 14th, 1973, to mother Debbie Rogie. There was no father information whenever I was doing my research. Brandy would grow up in the area called Bull Creek. Growing up, Brandy always would be more of a tomboy, playing in the mud, getting dirty, going fishing, and off-roading. One of Brandy's friends, the first day that they met, she pulled her straight into the mud, kind of as an initiation to welcome to Brandy's life. Brandy wasn't one for wearing dresses. She would always be wearing jeans, camouflage, and around the age of 11, Brandy would have a major three-wheeler accident that while going up a hill, the three-wheeler would fall back on her and do significant damage to her face and skull, fracturing her skull, both jaws, and a cheekbone, along with many other injuries. It would take a while for her to recover from her injuries and would be in the hospital for months and would require several surgeries as she would get older. Brandy always had a willingness and passion of helping others, and that three-wheeler accident was believed to be part of that. She would go on to study and become a firefighter and EMT following high school. And at 20 years old, she would become a volunteer at the Malabar Fire Station, where she would meet Jeffrey Hall during one of her volunteer shifts. Jeff would take on to Brandy pretty quickly, admiring her work ethic and willingness to jump in and get dirty. The two would go on to get married in 1992 and then would have 2 children together. Both would have good jobs, with Jeff being a fire chief at his station in Osceola, Florida, while Brandy would be working as a paramedic firefighter in her station in Palm Bay. Brandy's mother would help by watching the kids while Jeff and Brandy would work their 24-hour shifts. Their shifts coincided with each other so that they could have the same days off and be able to have that family time together. On Saturday, July 2nd, 2005, Brandy received some devastating news that her husband Jeff and a friend are arrested for marijuana cultivation. Brandy and Jeff owned the land together in addition to their home and other assets that they had, which they lived about 13 miles away from the land where the marijuana cultivation was taking place. And Jeff, unknowing to Brandy, was renting out the land to their friend to grow the marijuana. Brandy was under the assumption that Jeff was just renting the property out to someone, not knowing it was for growing pot. The money coming in was great, which Jeff was able to hide because Brandy and Jeff were making good salaries from their careers in the fire service. 6 days later, however, Brandy would also feel the repercussions of Jeff's actions as police would arrest Brandy while she was working her shift at the fire department to make a statement. This would be because her and Jeff's names were both on the deed. The charges would be eventually dropped and her name would be cleared. However, the damage would already be done after 10 years of service. Brandy would be fired from the Palm Bay Fire Department. After the charges were dropped and losing her job with the fire department, Brandy would pick up work with a local construction company doing odd and end jobs for her source of income, and then would volunteer at the Malabar Fire Station so that she could keep her certifications up. Because in the state of Florida, if you are not working or practicing in the fire service and medical, then your certifications will lapse after 2 years of inactivity. So now we pick up where we started with the intro to the episode. On August 17th, 2006, Brandy is working her shift at the Malabar Fire Station and calls Jeff that evening to say goodnight to him and the kids and say prayers with them. Then Brandy tells Jeff that she will see him in the morning. This all takes place between 9 and 9:30 p.m. around the kids' bedtime. So according to reports, Jeff would receive a call about his court appearance being moved to 8 a.m. the next morning. Jeff would then attempt to call Brandy sometime after 11:30 p.m. I believe in the reports it said the approximate time was 11:47 p.m. This would be immediately after Jeff received the news about the time change of his court appearance, because Brandy was supposed to be a character witness for Jeff. But when Jeff calls Brandy at 11:47 p.m., she doesn't answer. Believing that she's busy and probably on a call, he shrugs it off and will go to bed for the night, never hearing from Brandy. The following morning at 6:51 a.m., he tries reaching her again with no luck, then calls the fire department, but they tell him that she's already left. So Jeff would just assume she's on her way home and would see her soon. But as he's getting the kids ready for school, there is still no sign of Brandy. Randall, who is a friend of both Jeff and Brandy's, and Randall was also the fire captain at the Palm Bay Fire Station and Brandy's boss, calls Jeff at 7:27 a.m. that morning of Jeff's hearing. Jeff would report that Randall was crying when he called, and when Jeff asked him what was wrong with him, Randall told him that he wouldn't be able to be a character witness for Jeff, and during that phone call, Jeff would tell Randall, "No problem, but have you spoken or heard from Brandy?" And Randall would reply with no. So after dropping the kids off at school, he begins his drive to the courthouse and calls someone that works with Brandy. He advised Jeff that Brandy had left the night before around 10 p.m., and this would actually be a little bit of an underestimate, as we will find out shortly. So Jeff is now trying to figure out where Brandy is while he's going to deal with court. Jeff continues on to the courthouse, which is about an hour drive, and thinking that she might meet him there, but instead just finds some of his friends and family gathered outside waiting, and no one has seen or heard from Brandy. Later that morning, while Jeff is in court, Randall calls Jeff and asks if he can go to the house or their property to take a skid steer off of a trailer so Caterpillar can do some service work on it. So remember this little bit of detail and phone call about Randall calling Jeff about going to the property. It'll come up later in the case. So Jeff's sentencing hearing did not go well, and he is headed off to jail to start his sentence. Brandy's mother and her family is dealing with getting the kids picked up from school and settled, and then Brandy's mother sets out to look for Brandy with no leads. She just starts driving around looking for signs of Brandy. Then later that afternoon, early evening, police will discover Brandy's truck in a pond. Police would know it's Brandy's truck because someone that was fishing at the pond noticed a bag in the water, and when they went to go check out the bag, they found firefighters' gear along with other belongings that were Brandy's and were able to identify that it was Brandy's. Brandy was last seen leaving the Malabar Fire Station just before 11 p.m., at 10:51, which is the timestamp of the video at the fire department. Brandy's call home between 9 and 9:30 was not the last call that she had that night. She would take or make another call at 11:06 p.m., according to phone records. I want to thank the show's sponsor, BetterHelp, for helping keep the flame lit of the campfire for this episode. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service that's 100% online. So you don't have that awkwardness of sitting in a waiting room with a whole bunch of other strangers waiting to see your therapist. With BetterHelp, you have access to a network of over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with whatever you're dealing with. All you have to do to get started is answer some questions about what your needs and preferences are in therapy. So that way, BetterHelp can match you with a therapist that is right for you. And if you want to change your therapist because maybe you're not comfortable with them, you can change your therapist at any time for no additional charge. You also don't have to wait any specific time or any number of sessions to change your therapist. So when you match up with that right therapist, you can talk to your therapist however is most comfortable for you, whether it's text, chat, phone, or video. You can also message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you and your schedule. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom-picked for you, with more scheduling flexibility and more affordable prices. So if you go to the website and use the show's code, betterhelp.com/CCC, not only does that let them know that you heard it at the campfire, but you'll also receive 10% off your first month. So that's betterhelp.com/ccc. BetterHelp, HELP.com/ccc. And I'll also have a link provided in the show notes. So Randall Richmond, who is a retired fire captain, and as we talked about earlier, former boss of Brandy's at Palm Bay Fire Department, as well as being a close friend to Brandy and Jeff. He would become the focus in the police investigation after Brandy went missing, after he admits to police about having an affair with Brandy. Initially, he tells police that he's had no contact with Brandy for about 2 or 3 weeks, which is a lie, and investigators know this is a lie because they would find text messages and phone calls with Brandy, including about a 10-minute conversation with Brandy the night that she left the fire station and went missing. Randall Richmond would state to investigators that she was planning to leave town and claims that he promised Brandy he wouldn't tell anybody, and that's why he initially lied about talking to Brandy. He stated that Brandy was waiting for money to be brought to her at a Sunoco gas station, but wouldn't specify who was bringing her the money. So Randall claims to not know who was bringing her money. Police would look into Randall's claims of the phone conversation he had with Brandy, but no one at the gas station remembers seeing Brandy, nor were there any exterior security cameras outside to see Brandy's truck sitting outside like she was waiting for somebody to bring her something. When police check cell phone records and data, they were able to get a 3-mile radius off of a cell tower, which both include the Sunoco gas station and also the pond where her truck was found in that radius. So we don't know still if Brandy was at the Sunoco gas station because that cell phone tower in the 3-mile radius also fits with where her truck was found. Detectives would find blood in Brandy's truck, but after being subjected to the water and being submerged in the water, it was hard to tell how much blood was actually in the truck. Family members would also wonder why detectives haven't found Brandy's gun, which she always keeps on her. Theories speculate that if Brandy was approached, it was by someone that she knew. The question was also raised about if maybe drug dealers were involved, that was to keep Brandy quiet because they had found out that Brandy was supposed to testify and be a character witness for Jeff. After about a week since Brandy's truck was found, investigators take another look at Jeff Hall being involved with Brandy's disappearance. They would attempt to question him, but at this time, he had been released as his case was still going on and his sentencing hadn't been established yet for his crime with the pot growing. And his lawyers advised him to not speak with investigators about the case of Brandy, as the appeals were going on. Although his silence would suggest that he might be hiding something, you can also understand the fact that his lawyers would advise him to also not speak about the case while he was dealing with his own legal issues. As time would go on and no evidence of Brandy's whereabouts or remains would come up, the case would go cold until June 28th of 2007. It would be on this day in the Indian River that a backpack would be discovered in a canal and that it would have Brandy's day planner and some other items in it. Where Brandy's backpack was located and where her truck was discovered was about 30 miles difference, and there were no waterways connecting the pond where her truck was found and the canal where her backpack was found, leaving the conclusion that it was thrown in the canal. The discovery of the backpack rules out that Brandy fled on her own, Also, amongst the items found in her backpack were her medication that she had to take for severe headaches and migraines from her ATV accident as a child. Brandy always took her medication everywhere she went, so this would also rule out the theory that she left on her own accord. The backpack would be a short-lived lead, though, yielding no results. Miami Search and Rescue would be called back to the canal for using their sonar technology to look for evidence of Brandy's bodies being dumped in the canal or any other items that may have belonged to Brandy. However, those also would not yield any results. Jeff would lose his appeal and start serving 18 months for marijuana cultivation. He would begin speaking to investigators about Brandy's disappearance. Detectives would account the night that Brandy went missing and his whereabouts and arrange for a polygraph test for him upon his release, of which would prove there was no deception during the test and Jeff would be completely ruled out as a suspect. They were also able to rule out the drug hit to silence Brandy theory. The growers were a small operation and just getting started, according to Jeff. They weren't a large drug cartel or drug syndicate. However, further investigation from other parties would discover that the grow operation was a lot larger than Jeff made it out to be, using a large generator to run ventilation and lights and other accessories that required the power. They didn't want to draw a lot of attention by drawing a large power consumption with the power spikes using the power grid. So Jeff and his partner would use a large generator to run the power that they needed, of which during one of the storms became damaged and he would have to order another one and have it shipped from California, according to reports. It was also found that Jeff and his partner's pot operation was about a $1 million pot operation. So they weren't just growing a few plants and then selling like dime bags out on the street. They were selling like bricks to a distributor. But police would clear Jeff and move away from the drug theory anyway because both Jeff and Paul, who was Jeff's friend in the grow operation, would solely only take the blame, never implicating anyone else. So as far as the police were concerned, there was nobody else, and there was no reason for anyone to come after Jeff or Brandy, and that lead would seem to die. So after speaking with Jeff and clearing Jeff, investigators turned their attention back on Randall Richmond, who Brandy was having the affair with, of which Jeff would come across one of Brandy's cell phones and would find out about the affair that she was having. Both investigators and private investigators always questioned and wondered why Randall would insert himself into the middle of the investigation, especially since he was recognized as a figure of society in the fire department and being married and having an affair. You would think you would want to distance yourself as far away as possible, keeping yourself out of the spotlight and the media, especially when you had an affair with a former coworker. So now we're going to kind of get into the timeline of Brandy within the last 24 hours of Brandy's day before she went missing. And we're going to pick up sometime in the afternoon. We're not going to go through the mornings of the timeline because I felt like it was a little bit irrelevant. So a guy named Ronnie McCullen would lend Brandy money and also hook Brandy up with a contractor job for construction, installing culverts on new houses for holiday builders. Brandy and Jeff also had a welding shop where they would do like lift modifications for vehicles or modifications or projects for airboats or all-terrain vehicles, off-roading vehicles of that sort. And so sometime in the afternoon, Brandy leaves the welding shop to go work on these culverts. At 2:49 p.m., Brandy speaks with Randall, and then at 3:30 p.m., Brandy also speaks with a friend, Stacy Jellison, who she also saw and spoke earlier that day whenever she went to the welding shop. Investigators would talk to Randall about what him and Brandy talked about, and Randall would say in an interview that Brandy would talk to him about how much she has become to despise her husband Jeff because of all these drug charges that essentially ruined Brandy's life and career that she spent most of her adult life working towards and achieving. And losing her job and having to do all these side hustles, she basically blamed Jeff for having to change her lifestyle. This would also coincide with what Jeff would say in an interview, that Brandy was furious with him about losing her job and having to change her lifestyle, essentially blaming Jeff, because Brandy was a bit of a big spender. And after losing her job, she had to cut back on that as the side hustles made less money and she had to focus on paying her bills and taking care of her family. So in order for Brandy to install and fix culverts for houses, she would need a skid steer, and Randall would use his business to finance the skid steer, which Brandy needed, and Brandy would make payments on it. Danny Coggins was a friend of Brandy's and also worked at the fire department, and he would oversee these projects. So that day, Brandy was working with a guy named Terry Elrod to install these culverts that afternoon. And this was confirmed by Danny Coggins as he stopped around the construction site at about 4 or 4:30 that afternoon to talk with Brandy. Coggins and Brandy have known each other since childhood as they grew up together on Bull Creek. Danny would tell one of the private investigators that Brandy was planning on leaving Jeff because she blamed him for their financial problems, and also heard rumors about Brandy having an affair, but Brandy never talked to him about it. At 4:20 and 4:23, Brandy continues talking with Randall all the way through 5 p.m. It would begin raining, and Brandy would tell Danny that she would finish up the project first thing in the morning before Jeff's court appearance. Brandy gave Danny her word, and Danny knew Brandy always kept her promises. So when Brandy didn't show up the following morning to finish the project, Danny found it to be odd. So after leaving the construction project, she goes to a close friend's and meets up with them around 5:30 before going to the Malabar Fire Department for her volunteer night shift. According to reports, one of these close friends was known to have a criminal record, of which included drug activity, and it would initially give two stories. The first story they would give is that he hadn't seen Brandy for over a year, and then quickly changes his story to seeing her a few weeks prior, but claimed it was in passing, and never mentioning that he saw Brandy prior to her going to the fire department that evening. At 6:30 p.m., Brandy goes to the fire department for her shift. Randall and Brandy continued to text each other up until about 7 p.m., I believe, according to the reports. And then between 10:51 and 10:57, they begin texting each other again, at which at 11:06 p.m., Randall calls Brandy, where they have an almost 11-minute phone conversation that ends at 11:17 p.m. So there's a 9-minute gap between text and the phone call with Randall, and 26 minutes between the time that Brandy leaves the fire department and her call ends with Randall. So the question we ask ourselves, what is Brandy doing for 26 minutes? We know that she stops at the Sunoco gas station to fill up her truck, and according to Randall, was waiting to meet someone to give her money. So we can assume that 9 minutes between the texts and phone calls was when Brandy left the fire department. She drives to Sunoco gas station, fills up her truck, and then by then, Randall calls her, and that's when she tells him that she's waiting for someone to come to her. So the gas station is approximately a 6-minute, maybe 7-minute drive from Malabar Fire Department. So if you take into account probably 2 to 3 minutes to fill up her truck, depending on how much gas she needed, then that would make up the 9 minutes between text and phone call. I want to thank the show's sponsor, BetterHelp, for helping keep the flame lit of the campfire for this episode. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service that's 100% online. So you don't have that awkwardness of sitting in a waiting room with a whole bunch of other strangers waiting to see your therapist. With BetterHelp, you have access to a network of over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with whatever you're dealing with. All you have to do to get started is answer some questions about what your needs and preferences are in therapy. So that way, BetterHelp can match you with a therapist that is right for you. And if you want to change your therapist because maybe you're not comfortable with them, you can change your therapist at any time for no additional charge. You also don't have to wait any specific time or any number of sessions to change your therapist. So when you match up with that right therapist, you can talk to your therapist however is most comfortable for you, whether it's text, chat, phone, or video. You can also message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you and your schedule. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom-picked for you with more scheduling flexibility and more affordable prices. So if you go to the website and use the show's code, betterhelp.com/CCC, not only does that let them know that you heard it at the campfire, but you'll also receive 10% off your first month. So that's betterhelp.com/CCC. BetterHelp, HELP.com/CCC. And I'll also have a link provided in the show notes. Jasmine Campbell, who's an off-duty Palm Bay officer, observes Brandy's truck pull into the Walmart parking lot and park across 3 spaces. She was going to call the tags in to run them as the behavior of the truck and the way it was parked stood out to Campbell. However, with high radio traffic being up due to an incident on the other side of the county, Campbell didn't get the chance to call in the tags. Campbell would also state in her report that she saw a fire captain's SUV sitting at the Hess station near the Walmart and also found that to be odd and out of place since the Hess station was closed. Campbell was sworn in by her supervisor about what she saw that night with Brandy's truck and the fire captain's SUV. Because of that, she assumed the conversation was recorded, but it wasn't. Then this report of Campbell's would be lost for 4 years until it was brought up in conversation again in 2010. So because of this, the exact time was unclear, just that she remembered it happened after her shift ended, which was around 11 p.m. So who was in the fire captain's SUV at the gas station that night? Only 2 captains were on duty that night that Brandy Hall went missing. One had an airtight alibi that he was at the station and was confirmed by his men that he was working with. The other was Randall Richmond, whose men couldn't account for him being at the station all night. So although police would move on with their investigation, they don't completely rule out Randall. There was credible evidence that Randall Richmond was at the fire department that night, but when the crew on shift was not able to account for his whereabouts when they were questioned, it doesn't add up, and it's possible that Richmond had left that night. When investigators question Randall, investigators make a pretty valid point when they ask Randall about Brandy. The night that Brandy disappears, Randall's 10-minute and 46-second phone call with Brandy ends at 11:17. Then Jeff tries to contact Brandy at around 11:30, I believe 11:47 was the exact time, with no answer, and continues trying to contact Brandy the following morning looking for her. All of Brandy's people, family, friends, also try to get a hold of Brandy, and all this is verified through phone records. The only person not trying to contact Brandy after 11:17 p.m., the night that Brandy goes missing, was Randall. While Randall was talking to investigators, a former FDLE profiler and agent, Tom Davis, witnessed Randall crying. And if you remember, the morning that Brandy went missing and the morning of Jeff's court appearance, when Jeff talked to Randall on the phone, he was also crying. Investigators would also bring up the fact that Randall talked to Brandy on an average of 52 times a day, and on the day that Brandy was last seen alive, that between text messages and phone calls, Randall and Brandy talked to each other a total of 87 times. After ending the phone call at 11:17 p.m., it was noted that Randall doesn't try to get in contact with her again. And when investigators asked Randall about this, according to the research, it seemed that Randall didn't have an answer. So maybe this is just coincidence that he doesn't try to contact her again. But I've never been too much of a believer in coincidences. So I feel like this is a good time to backtrack and go back to the morning of Jeff's court appearance, where Randall calls Jeff to ask him if he can go on the property to take the skid steer off the trailer so that Caterpillar could do service work on it, because Brandy was supposed to do that morning but didn't. So there's a lot of speculation to this, because Randall was supposed to be in court with Jeff that morning to support him and be a character witness for him, and he bailed and canceled on Jeff at the last minute. So we can look at this as one of two ways. Either Randall never had an appointment scheduled for service work and text to come out and work on the skid steer since he was originally planning to be somewhere else, or he always knew he was never going to go to court for Jeff and made these arrangements for the service work to be done. But if it was already on the trailer, why not leave it on the trailer and just bring it to the service shop to get serviced? More speculations would rise that Randall needed to use the skid steer to do something much more sinister, such as maybe dig a grave to hide a body. However, there are better pieces of equipment to dig holes, but it is also possible that Randall didn't have access to anything other than the skid steer. And if you're going to hide a body, what better way than when everyone who is looking for Brandy is preoccupied and not anywhere near the home? So, going back to where we are in our timeline, in December of 2007, investigators get a search warrant for Randall's vehicle. I guess hoping that Randall hadn't cleaned out his truck if there was any evidence of Brandy in his truck. With about a year and a half going by, you'd think he would have cleaned it out by now, and any traces of evidence of Brandy or foul play would long since be gone. Rumors of the affair became public knowledge, and Randall's wife would confront Brandy, and the two would have an altercation. 7 months prior to Brandy's disappearance, the two would have a very public and verbal confrontation, confronting Brandy about the affair. Several witnesses, including Jeff, found text messages from Anne Marie Richmond threatening Brandy, and the two would go back and forth in text conversations, sending threats to each other. Judge Lisa Davidson signed a declaration 9 years after Brandy Hall went missing and presumed dead. Her death certificate was received the same night that she disappeared, on August 17th, 2006. So now we're going to fast forward a little bit, and the private investigators would find and report that the skid steer was indeed taken off the trailer, but remained on the property of Jeff and Brandy's home, and it was observed in the backyard. Investigators would use Google Earth and find a depression in the backyard of Brandy and Jeff's home after Brandy went missing. They would compare this to Google Earth images to several weeks prior to Brandy going missing, and that depression in the backyard would not be there. In October of 2019, a dig was done where Brandy's body could possibly have been based on results from cadaver dogs and also ground penetrating radar or GPR. It was enough to perform a dig. However, the dig would yield no results. Where they dug was in Brandy and Jeff's backyard where they used to live. Jeff would tell US Today that there won't be any closure for him or Brandy's family until her killer is caught and in prison. As of today, Brandy's remains still haven't been found, which makes it difficult to formulate a case without a body, although difficult, not impossible. We do not yet have closure to this case as Brandy's remains haven't been found yet and no arrests or convictions have been made. As more updates come in, I will follow up with update episodes. Also, I just wanted to give you guys an update about the Cassie Sheets case. Although I don't have anything concrete yet, I've been receiving tips and looking into these tips and fact-checking the tips that I've been receiving. I've been getting reports and documents to help fact-check as I can conclude more information on what I find. And what I don't find, I will update everyone. That concludes this case at the campfire. I know there is more information that I didn't include in this story as there was a lot of information to cover. All resources used to gather information for the case include but not limited to news articles, reports, and documentaries, as well as other sources. I appreciate everyone who has gathered by the campfire with me for this case and appreciate all the show's supporters. Don't forget to rate the show 5 stars wherever you are listening to the show. Also, I'm still working on a different bonus content feature to where subscribers can access everything in one place wherever you get your podcast. Up until now, I've been using Patreon and still am using Patreon currently for the bonfire and the after party. Once everything is changed over, I will let you guys know. I appreciate all the support from all the listeners and supporters. Also, if you wish to support the show and not necessarily sign up for a subscription, you can support the show with the S'mores Fund through the website campfirecrimechronicles.com. or send it directly to PayPal using the email campfirecrimechronicles@gmail.com. A link will be provided into the show notes. A lot of research and fact-checking, unfortunately, isn't free like everything else in the world, and your support and donations are appreciated to help keep the podcast going and to be able to access all the information I can for the research and documents that aren't readily and easily available. And if you haven't done so yet, check out the merchandise store through the website, or you can get the direct links in the show notes or find them on social media. There you can find t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, mugs, hats, and a lot more. So join me next time in 2 weeks as we gather around the campfire for the next case that we dive into. And remember to sleep with one eye open. I am Kevin, and this is the Campfire Crime Chronicles, a true crime podcast.